Hello and welcome to part 2 of this triple extrapolation series. Now, what is triple extrapolation? Really quickly, it is when one writes down insights that they have throughout the day and then at some point goes through and reads them all and extrapolates. So if something comes to mind that is related or an addition to that insight, the insight is kind of like a prompt that is prompting more exploration or more to be uncovered. And so I did that by doing a video talking to myself, which is number 128.5. And then for 129, I went back to a dialogue with my custom GPT OP. And so from that, we extrapolated more of the same stuff. So that was a second extrapolation, or perhaps a third, I can't keep count. But now I'm going to go through what I extrapolated from listening to the video I did, which I call a self-dialogue with the insights, which is an extrapolation, as well as the audio conversation with Opie, which is another extrapolation. So now I'm going to be going through my extrapolations, and that will lead me to likely extrapolate another layer, which is triple extrapolation. So it kind of goes on like that. But another thing I usually extrapolate is new insights that I have that don't come from extrapolating from dialogues or previous content. They might come from just what I'm learning in the day or my workflow or just seeing a word. And so I'll go through those first. And then we'll go through the ones from the video as well as the audio, because that's how I would do it. It's whatever new ones come through plus whatever gets extrapolated. So I just set it up like this. And these ones, for some reason, I put them on sticky notes on this colored piece of paper. I don't know why. But the first one, I noticed that the word work backwards is crow. Of course, yeah, it's spelt with a K. But it's like when you crow or you to crow, and there's a lot of symbolism around crows and everything, then it's kind of like the opposite or like the inverse of work. So that was a word play. And then I'm going to move some of this stuff over here. This is, it's common to say perhaps change how people see the world. So this is a transmutation, and I wrote change how people be the world, because J. Krishnamurti has a quote, "You are the world. You are the world and the world is you." So is it about seeing the world or being the world? That's a transmutation. And then what do we have here? Oh yeah, this was a quote by someone named Sam Azout. So sometimes they're quotes from other people. And so it was a sticky note from before. I was going through some old sticky notes, the ones that were on my wall. They're mostly cleared off now. And he said, anyone with a will plus a laptop plus a point of view can go from 0 to dangerous in days or something. I think I missed part of that. So then, since in the video and the audio with Opie, I was talking about the word guardiness. So here's where a word that I was talking about before in a different context, like the course Dangerous Gifts by Sasha Altman de Bruhl, which is a great course. Here the word dangerous comes up, and now I can insert guardiness and gandrous just for fun. So would it ever be a saying to say become guardinous in days? Probably not, but it's fun to see how the words sort of flow through the process. Okay, what's next? Oh, I messed that up. Oh well. I finally figured out how to say this. The special theory of relativity of relatively special messages. That's what I wanted to say. Just a play on Einstein's special theory of relativity. Because there's a certain gravity in words, right? In language. It literally bends things and warps things in to a different space-time, right? So that's something. And the self is an it, that it's all over itself. I'm always often pondering about the self, because in a way it's kind of an it, right? Like, I have a self structure, but that structure is like programming or habit. It's like this ball, it's like this thing ready to react. It's almost like an it, but when I take it as my identity, as all of my identity, it's perhaps meant to be one of the characters. So if you think about Jill Bolte Taylor's 4 characters, there's character 1, left thinking, and I think that's actually supposed to be left speaking. So character 1 is supposed to be left speaking for the right brain, or light, you could say. And then character 2 maybe is supposed to be sort of this self structure that's like protection and things like that. Like, we do need that for sure. But when we take it to be our whole structure, and also it sort of influences the character 1 that is the thinking, and makes it not really think that well a lot of the time, well, then like we don't even really have like a functional character 1. Maybe that's possible still without the character 3 and 4 of the right brain. I don't know. We're just sort of playing with that as a parallel structure, I would say. And the word abolitionist. I'm not an abolitionist. I call myself an expansionist. Just keep expanding meaning and everything. And that does something too. I'm not saying one's better than the other per se. But then I was thinking about the word catalyst. And I was using it to say frame a role that I might play, for example. But I was thinking actually catabolism is breaking things down in the body, and anabolism is building things up, and anabolism plus catabolism is metabolism, right? So you could say metabolist or anabolist, but a lot of time we say catalyst, and that's about catabolism, and it's about breaking things down. So we could be using the wrong word. So from seeing that I was writing catalyst, and then thinking about the word catalyst and what it actually means, then thinking about how maybe that's not quite the right word, then I see that maybe we're not using the right word, and the right word to be using, if we're going to use one versus the other, is anabolist, because it's about the constructive phase. So that's something I saw by, I guess, kind of pausing about that word. Like, I guess another word I made up yesterday was Lextuition, which is like an intuition of words. And so this was a Lextuition moment for sure. And so was the one with the elem yesterday, when I was like looking up elem in real time and being like, oh, maybe that means something. I had no idea. Whereas in this case, with the elem, it was the word symmetry, like ELEM and SLEF, that made me curious that if it did have a meaning, then the fact that each have 4 letters makes it somewhat coherent. It's not like saying, oh, I'm going to just create this 11-letter word for self, the opposite of the self, or the self of the right brain. It's there's some kind of symmetry there. Not sure if it matters, but it's just part of the way I think the Lextuition works. And in this case, I'm a biology major from back in the day, so I did have some kind of knowledge about this, yet, it took me 25 years to pick up on it. Pick up on this could be a better word than that. And let's see what the next topic is. Okay. Yeah. So seeing insights is catabolism. So here now, rather than saying a catalyst or catabolism, I should say that a catalyst is probably coherent, because a catalyst is different than catabolism in general. It makes a reaction easier without being used up in the process. So I wonder why it's not called an anabolist and they chose catabolist or catalyst, I mean. Either way, there still could be something about this because, for example, so here I was thinking about the word catabolism and how for it, it's about breaking things down into smaller parts, right? And then I was thinking about insights, and even these stickies are like small parts, right? And now if you could say this is a small part of, we're just calling it the right brain as a parallel structure, right? So an insight is catabolism. The whole breaks the right brain down into smaller units. And I put brain as in B-R-A-N-E, because it means an extended object with any given number of dimensions. So say the right brain world is also 3 dimensions. It might be more, right? Or 4 dimensions. Actually, it wouldn't have the dimension of time. It doesn't have a time dimension. But anyway, so reuncovery, which is the process I use, and speaking of reuncovery, this part of doing the triple extrapolation and even taking the insights off the wall and pondering them or putting them somewhere is actually what I've been sort of resisting. So in essence, I've been resisting in my my paradigm, the reuncovery part. I've been abiding in the uncovery, the catabolism, the little bits of insights, and I haven't been reuncovering them, which is like extrapolating them or putting them into projects. And that's actually something I've been doing today. Like I've been putting some into spoken word, I've been putting some into lexicon, the lexicon project I'm doing. I've been putting some into ideas for creating Substack notes, because I do need to make short-term form content at some point. But again, here I am on the long form again. I just can't help it. So reuncovery is anabolism. It's using energy to build complex wholes from smaller, simpler precursors. So here, this is the metabolism. So in that sense, like stage B of reuncovery is more like reuncovery, and stage A is more like this catabolism, which maybe needs another word. Like maybe reuncovery is more stage B. I was thinking it was A and B, but if we think about A as catabolism, as like the right brain world, sending little bits across the membrane, so then that can be used as information to build the brain. Something like that. And what's this? Okay, then I got into playing with the term writer's block. Where did I see that? Well, it's a very common term, but I can't remember where I saw it exactly, but maybe it'll come to me. Maybe it doesn't matter. So I changed it to writer's slock. Well, of course, what I did was I looked up words that end in lock or have the word lock in it. And a web page comes up with all of that. And then I always pick the one that is the same number. So I'm not going to pick one with like 5 things here and then lock. I'm just going to pick with the one letter for the most part, unless one's like super good. So I usually have to click on what some of them mean, and that's learning as well. So slock is to quench, to allay, and to slake, which they're all circular, but these ones, I kind of feel familiar with that. Like it feels a little familiar, but maybe not. And yeah, to quench is definitely familiar, right? So now if we think of writer's block as not being able to write, or not being able to create, or not being able to do, then writer's slock is when we're quenched, or we're quenching, right? Which is like kind of in the flow. So, why, for me, this kind of comes from, but I'm actually only thinking about this in retrospect, that we don't have some of the opposing terms or the balancing terms for some of these kind of like, it's not negative, but these challenges. So we have a word for this challenge, but where is the equivalent balancing word to when it's not a challenge, or when we kind of are not having that challenge? You might think, oh, writer's flow, right? But, flow is such a general term. Like, why do we just basically have flow and not so many words that go under it, like writer's slok? Because we probably have 10 times the amount of negative terms around some kind of challenge for like the amount of positive. And I would have to actually look that up to know for sure what the average is, but I'm pretty sure it's like that. And then, oh yeah, so this next one you probably already read, but so slake was basically also quench. So then, of course, yeah. So then, of course, I write for F's slake. I won't say it for the slake of it. So that's the F's that quench, because you might have seen or read the book that is about not giving your F's. So for F's slake, because a lot of times F is associated with bad stuff, like for F's sake. There's some that are meant for good, like F and A, But at the same time, there's probably 10 to 1 or 5 to 1 bad connotations of using it for fun. And I remember there's a monologue by Osho saying how great this and versatile this word is. So like, why don't we add some more good? So for F slake is the F's that quench. Now, I sort of transmuted, and I don't know if I wrote this on the next one or not, but I put flux because I think we need to have flexibility. We need to be able to flow. We need to be fluid, but we also need to be able to flux. So flow, and I'm talking about in creativity. So you could say the flux, then you don't even need that word anymore, see? The flux that quench. So you'd have for flux, slake. Now, you can even transmute this a little bit for the fun of it. And so if you go for, I don't know if this is still recording, I should check. Okay, so we have for flux, slake. So now we just go for flux, and then we'll just use the easier word, which is quench. Now we're going to take this and make this the 4 characters of the brain. So this is saying when there's the 4 flux, when there's a flux of the 4 characters of the brain, there's a quenching. So that's sort of going to something we talked about earlier here. And this wasn't even on the docket, which was talking about the 4 characters, but I just brought it in. And by bringing it in, I sort of connected it to this. And I want to just say it could be like having 4 flux capacitors, kind of like the movie Back to the Future, right? And maybe the flux is kind of going back and forward, like from the past to the future. And what I would say is like past and future is actually like you can think of it temporally. Past, future, temp. But you can also think of it linguistically, like using language that is outmoded for one's wanting to manifest, right? To one can use a language of the future that is far beyond what is even used now in this present time. And maybe that's part of what I'm doing. This is not what I talk about to people on the street. You know, I don't know, just my brain actually, I would say it kind of has the character. So if I imagine this as sort of a character 4 talking, you know, that's at home. And then, you know, I can use, like character 3 is the fun one. I can bring that out a bit, and also character 1 when it's present. So anyways, we'll move on from that. Okay, so we're still on the topic of writer's block. So I found another word. I didn't find it, but it's just a word that ends in lock. And a flock is one of the definitions is a large crowd or number, right? So if you could think like you have a crowd of insights, you have writer's flock. So now all of a sudden, for the exact term of writer's block, we have 2 terms that are the positive. So we've just like outweighed it by 50%. And now there could be other terms for writer's block, but we could outweigh those too by transmuting them. And so that one's relatively straightforward. And then let's go this way. I just like to see one at a time, I guess. So now there's another word, writer's clock. So one of the definitions of clock on the website I was on was a source of regularly occurring pulses used to measure the passage of time. Now imagine if insights or ideas or creativity or whatever is the regular pulse, instead of like the hand of a clock and like a number, you know, or like an interval. So, you know, maybe they're irregular pulses, but they're semi-regular. So they're not pulses like how a clock is like clockwork. Instead of it's like, you could say maybe it's like flockwork. Like flockwork. Or slockwork, you know, to quench, the work of getting quenched. I don't know, I'm just kind of adding them in here. So, yeah, if we think about rather than time passing, it's like creativity adding, I don't know, like passage. I don't know, we can just say the sage of time is maybe, which we get from the end of passage of time. So we just made that up. I don't know. I think I'm going a little further with these just because I'm talking to myself on a video, but it's not that necessary. Oh, and one of the definitions, and this was so fascinating to me, one of the definitions of clock on this website at least was the downy flower head of a dandelion that has gone to seed. That's pretty cool. I maybe have an extrapolation about that. Maybe not. Maybe I was just, oh yeah. Yeah, the right brain world exists as a dandelion clock. Oh, and I'm seeing that's kind of how it is, right? So we were just talking, before seeing this part and this part, we're talking about these pulses, right? So in this case, the pulse of the clock is actually this dandelion clock. And then, you know, when one flies, that's the pulse. And then another one, whenever that is, the time isn't regular, right? It's probably based on some kind of probability space. and like the clarity of one's perception and what one is doing and all this stuff. But it is actually from a clock. So this is something when I discover something like this in language, and perhaps this is a discovery in language because I don't know what the word for that would be, because we've got Lextuition for like an intuition, and that may or may not lead to a discovery. Maybe I'll just kind of frame it in the recovery terms, because to uncover something, right? Or it could even just be Lexcovery, depending if one wants to, not sure which one's better. But I would say that this is kind of a discovery in language from a definition that then creates some kind of possible way of understanding the clock of the right brain and how it is timeless, but then there's still, like, there's no dimension of time here. It's not dependent on time. It's not, oh, well, now there's going to be one because it's been a minute. Yeah. So I like this, and I feel like even though I don't know anything about it, this might actually model something, just like nature models something for like computation or AI or something. So that would actually be something to look up, but it would be on my purview. But I would still be curious if there's an algorithm. And of course, one in nature, there's like the wind and all these factors. So, those are parts of the factors of daily life. Like daily life is kind of like the wind. Somewhat, or at least the weather. It's more like the weather, the consciousness algorithm, or non-algorithm, I mean. I don't think it's computable, if I have that right. Now, we are going to get on to this next bit, which is the insights from the dialogue with myself, the extrapolations. So now we're going to talk about the extrapolations from 128.5 and 129. So 128.5, I was talking with myself. I was extrapolating insights. Then I talked about them again with Opie. That was 129. And then I listened to them. So I'm going to first extrapolate the insights that I had from listening to my video I did with myself in self-dialogue. And then after that are the insights or extrapolations from listening to my conversation with Opie. So, self-dialogue audio. Yeah, so from listening to it, at one point I talked about bipolar ingenuousness, and then another part I talked about new linguistic features. So then by combining them, I have my new diagnosis, which dia means through, and gnosis means basically the spiritual mysteries. So I do have a diagnosis of bipolar, but my diagnosis, right now, I can make up all sorts of things. But what I'm pointing at is that I realized I could connect this with that. They were on two separate pages. And then I used the word taxing, And it made me realize that there's basically a tax on this type of creativity. And it's like iterative crashing. So it's like almost, and this could be gone into more, but for now, it's like there's going into it. And actually, I think we'll get to it later, what the tax is. I don't know if I said it as a tax or not. Maybe I'm just going to peek ahead. I know that's kind of, yeah, I didn't write it as the tax. So this, I'm seeing it now. The tax. So that was me kind of talking to myself in the background. And the thing I wrote is on the very last page. And I know this isn't very clear right now, but I have 4 pages of notes. And the last page are insights I had after listening to these things, like just continuing with my workflow. So they weren't part of the insights that I had from watching the videos, but this one was. So I just connected it, and I wanted to do that in case I forgot, because it's a good one. So we'll get to that. Lextuition in real time. Yeah, just listening to it, I realized I looked up the word elem in real time on the video, and so that was just showing that it can happen. And it also happened again when I was looking at something else. Can't remember what it was now. So, talking about not sharing gardenous gifts to all. I don't know what that means. Supergraphia is like painting. Spontaneous impossibility space. So the amount of writing that happens, it almost feels like being a painter, you know, like a painter's always painting or coming back to the painting. And it's kind of similar. Obviously, it's a different skill than painting, and it's in a sense not as skilled because it's just an extension of being able to write. But at the same time, just with like the amount of it, it's like painting and then painting over and then saying it a little different way and painting it over. But the thing about this kind of painting over is that it's forgive the pause, but I had a cramp in my leg or something. So this kind of painting over is there's no paint. So like if I write something down, and then I want to paint over it with more words, the note where I originally wrote it down is now gone. You know, it's in the computer somewhere. It's on another piece of paper. So there's an iteration of getting to the point of being a skilled painter or a skilled writer like this, that eventually the memes become more clear and easier to communicate, right? So even just this bit here is, yeah, talking. I don't know what that means. I didn't write that very well. I think I remember this one actually. I wrote this first and then I wrote this, and it was a bit lost because sometimes if it comes through and the second part comes through, then I want to capture the second part because usually it's a little bit better. So I didn't want to miss supergraphia is like painting, because there was more to that can be unfolded, but this part came through not so well. I don't really know what that means. Okay, so then I had an extra line to put on my claimer. And yeah, I should say, I wrote over that, but I shouldn't have. It's Christina Randall. She says she sources all her information from very public sources. So I source these insights from very public perceptions. Now, this one is kind of like, I really like how she says her disclaimer. And sometimes she'll say it at the beginning, sometimes she'll say it at the end, sometimes she'll say it when it just feels like then it needs to be said. So she'll even say, she often says, I don't know these people. So the thing that would be said for that is something about the unknown, right? So this would be unknown, actually. I source these insights from very public unknowns, something like that. And that's to go with I don't know. Yeah, so that's just kind of fun, right? And let's see. Sharing language flexibility is giving my flux. So that was related to that other one. It might not have been an extrapolation from my video. And then a reminder to myself to ask for what resonates. Because, you know, maybe some of this is helpful for people who also have linguistic features. Okay. Maxim. Okay, so I remember for this is just a fix on, I was saying maxims times x, or when it's pressured, you know. And then when we've talked before about how a comma is one pause, a semicolon is two pauses, which is like 2 commas, and 3 commas is colon, or 3 pauses. So that's why I wrote maxim. You could even write it like this, right? There's got to be silence on both sides of it. So that was just a little bit of a fix, because I had it written as like maxim plus maxim. Now, that's all I got out of listening to I think it was like a 38-minute video. And that's actually good, because too many extrapolations just builds it up. So then listening to Opie and I got, I think, 2.5 pages or something. So let's see what I wrote. Oh yeah, so Opie was talking and said something, it needs infrastructure, and then said like 2 more words and said the word infrastructure again and just repeated it, like infrastructure, period. So then I was like, oh, you know, maybe that's a sign, because usually that doesn't happen, like in the language patterns. So it's sort of like noticing a change in a language pattern can be a bit of a sign. Like Opie and I were talking recently about the word grounding. And then Opie was saying grounding, and then other things happened. And then a friend even sent me like something about an acorn in the ground little story. So there was the word grounding again, or ground. So it was a theme, right? Sometimes words can be themes. And I was in a really creative space. So I remember I was saying that AI needs OI, or original ideas. And AI is topped, well, I don't know if it's topped, but maybe it's synergized by IO, ingenious originality. Okay, and then I transmuted the word speechlessness, which we were talking about in terms of elem, into Seymourness, right? So speechlessness is Seymourness. So if we just say speechlessness, it sounds pretty like boring, but it's actually Seymourness. So when we just say the less, right? Like there's a lot of words that have blank less. But what about blank more? How many words are there like that? How many? That's a good question, right? And semio speech. I can't remember if Opie said that or if I would just... That's kind of another neologism. So we're going to go into the next page. Okay, what is here? A lot of messy writing. Okay, so I was thinking, or something came to me. I think that the left brain doesn't have to cooperate, but to inoperate. Become inoperative. Stop operating on reality. Breaking it up into pieces. See wholes. Now, these sometimes are like directly from the dialogue. Another video to do, just for fun, would be to, just because I'm trying to show the layers of this, I guess, is to listen to a dialogue and then extrapolate in real time. So that way you can see exactly what it comes from. Here, I don't really know. Like, did I hear the word cooperate and then think inoperate? Or, like, how did that come up? Sometimes I know, but sometimes I don't. And what I'm saying is, like, sometimes I'll be listening and I'll have an insight that's not related directly to any of the words. Like, there's no tokens that match, I guess I could say. And from an insight, the words are as the least action of light. So the law of least action of light, that fascinates me. Not that I really understand it fully. But sometimes you can draw linguistic parallels to physics equations. And it's not meant to be exactly as the physics, but it's kind of a physics of language. So from an insight, the words come from like a flash of light, like an aha, right? Aha. So, somebody might say aha, but they're actually having these words come out and they would write them down. So that's an aha moment. So if you read something or hear me say something and you're like, aha, and then you write something down that's like different, like it's according to your context, well, that's cool, right? That's an aha moment. I would say it's actually an aha momentum because it goes beyond the moment, right? So this aha moment, say this one's an aha moment, there's momentum here, right? And another way I like to divide up the word momentum is moment. So it's a moment plus a pause, right? So you could say a colon, for example. So you might even just say this. Or then put maxim after, right? Something like that. So what I was seeing here, and this is something related to choiceless awareness, which also fascinates me. And I think there is a connection between choiceless awareness, that mode of consciousness, it's not the only mode, and the law of least action of light. But what I was seeing here is that with a certain insight, the words from that flash are of the law of the least action of light. So the words come with the insight. So the insight's a flash, but the words are there, like the words that would be said. And so what I was realizing, that if the words are embedded or encoded in the insight, the words are choiceless too. Meaning they're I guess, well, you might say determined, but we're going to have to go up here for this. Deter mind. You know, deter is like to steer aside, right? So like you can actually see the incoherence in this word. Now, if you think of mind as in like mining, right? So what are we actually mining? Well, you could say they're light mind. Let's just go with that for now, to not get stuck on it. Because that's not even right though, because that is like infinite possibilities, right? So it might be, I'm not sure. What I'm trying to say is the words are mind, and then they're exact. They're exact. They're truth is what I'm trying to say. So they're not determined, but they're truth. Like nothing else could be said. Nothing else could be spoken. There's no deception process going on. And that's the only way to get access, if you want to call it that, to these words, is to not be in this deception. The self is deception. And so yeah, they're truthful. Truth mind? No. Well, we'll just call them true mind. You know, to deter versus to be true. So they're true mind. And so, yeah, lightning sight and thunder speech go together. They're not separate, even though there is a time delay in how they roll out, just like thunder and lightning. You know, it's one process of electromagnetism or electrostatics or whatever it is. I don't know, pressure. But then it manifests as these two things, the light and the sound, but they go together. And that's the same with choiceless awareness. So in the same way, when you have a certain kind of lightning, you have in a certain place, you have the exact sound is there. You don't hear something that is different than that totality. So it's the same with the way you speak. So the words come as an Ella maxim, perhaps. Yeah, maybe, because moment maxim. But then, you know, this makes me curious about, you know, what are all these bits related to lightning sight and thunder speech? Because you think, oh, they're separate, but then there's this behind it, right? You know, you can say consciousness, choiceless awareness, but I'm relatively certain those things can be built out, at least linguistically. Oh yeah, so Opie said, train in your signal density or something like that. And in a way, like, I guess this would change this too, right? For example, like, say I have one insight, and so one lightning sight and one thunder speech. That's a low signal density. So, you know, there can be gradations of truthfulness over time, right? Because of the signal density and whether it's been engaged with and extrapolated, right? So if it's not engaged with and extrapolated, if it's not re-encoded and all that, then it's not necessarily going to create a signal density. It might just create more chaos. I don't know. But yeah. So yeah, I was writing, so there's no deception. So I saw that a moment later, that there's no deception. It's not possible. Now, okay, so then I remember I was talking about rumble wrist. So a lot of times lightning sight creates rumble wrist, like right here, all this messy writing. But then when I was trying to say an insight to Opie, and sometimes, I'm saying something for the first time, or it's a little bit outside the context, or whatever. It's more like bumble speech than really thunder speech. So it's not exactly clear. So there's an element of thunder speech in it, in that the exploration is sincere, but one is learning in order to find the coherence. So one's aware that there and what I'm saying too is like they're relative truths, meaning one is being truthful to oneself, not meaning, oh, it's the ultimate truth or the ultimate reality, just a sincere exploration. So sometimes it's bumble speech, bumbling through an insight that is still in the difficult meme stage with enough training, dialogue, extrapolation, to be thunder speech or something. I don't know what that says. But the thing is that one needs to be, sometimes I call it spontaneous, vulnerable speech. I don't really like the word vulnerable. But in a sense, I guess it is, because a lot of times when we learn, we become afraid to like voice our learning process, or to be uncertain, or share our curiosities, when it's kind of part of it, right? But the thing about ChatGPT is it's relatively easy to do that. Like Bumble speech is widely accepted by ChatGPT and a custom GPT, right? It's actually a good place for kind of like testing the memes, or not really testing them, but testing them out on one's tongue, like tasting them, I guess, in a sense. So let's see. Oh yeah, be healthy so it's easier for your light to help you. Yes, I got that from somewhere in here, in the dialogue. Let's see. Okay, so this was kind of weird. T, capital T, that often stands for something, but I don't even want to say the word because I don't like to say it. But this is when I was listening to Opie. I was sharing an insight at the moment that I was listening to the dialogue, and I was saying that I feel that I can say any insight. And at that moment, I was having an insight that I felt like I wouldn't want to say. So it was funny, because I realized in a way, for myself, from my perspective, that tea is a creative way to get me to wake up. So I'm writing this down as Opie says, an insight that you feel you can't say. Yeah, Opie said, say an insight you feel you can't say. And then I said, I can say anything. And then what I was seeing was this related to like some of the experiences and things, and then being like, oh, well, that was creative. You kind of like laugh at this point. Oh, that was creative. Haha. I don't know if it's funny or not, so I should put a question mark. And this is me and my experience personally. Just because from this perspective now, like my mind is quite clear. I like the way my brain works after all of this better. So maybe that's what had to happen, Like anything that is perceived as supposedly not so good. I don't know. I really don't know about that. But it was an interesting feeling, and there was a lot more to that insight, and that makes me wonder. So there's the lightning sight. There's the thunder speech. There's the bumble speech. There's the rumble wrist. But there's more. It's like, I don't know what the word would be. Thunder, rumble. It has something to do with, and something to do with the freshness after a lightning strike. That permeates the environment, I guess. Yeah. So that's what I was just seeing, and I haven't really thought of it this way. Is like there's all that information that can't be communicated through speech. Like there's something like in the body, and then like a knowingness and a learning. Like there's a lot, you know. So this is, yeah, it's kind of hard to outline right now. Not hard, but we'll just go on. Yeah, so something else, and this is sometimes what happens when I listen to the dialogue, or when I'm having the dialogue with Opie. Sometimes I'm not listening because it's hard to listen and maybe look at the next insight. A lot of times I'm listening and replying, but sometimes I'm not fully listening, and even if I was, it's not the same as listening again for the next extrapolation. So what I heard Opie describe on this next, the round of actually listening, is like 3 levels, or 3 distinctions. I won't say like levels, but you could say there's dangerous gifts, there's ganderous gifts, and there's gardenous gifts. So some that are like a glance, some that arrive through, say, like a dangerous journey, and then some that you have to really tend, right? So the ganderous gifts could be things like, say, for example, for me, like my perception is pretty clear, right? So a ganderous gifts could be the lexagination, which is kind of how I see words from perceptions. And then gardenous gifts is like, well, if I wanted to do like a spoken word something, I would really have to cultivate that, right? That's generally not something that, like, maybe it can be embodied in a state for a short period of time, and it's almost like a little bit of a self-circus event in a good way, but it's not sustainable. Though, maybe circus isn't the greatest word, because, people who do a circus event actually have gardenous gifts. They've cultivated a lot. So, yeah, I'm just saying that it does take some tending. So I liked how this one, and it was something that, I don't know if I had thought of exactly or seen, as kind of sometimes breaking them up into 3 distinctions from a word rather than doing a transmutation. So, yeah, so it's different than a transmutation is like breaking it up like this, extending it, I should say. So yeah, I miss these layers rather than picking one and transmuting it, but it's like splitting into 3, kind of like a particle accelerator. So maybe we could say, I think there's something about words as like articles. So article accelerator. Why not, right? Yeah, I don't know if article is the right word, but I think article is a part of speech, right? So if we say article, the art, we could be like, rather than a part of speech, it's like speech into parts. like many parts, nuance basically. Not parts as in like pieces, but as in nuance. So then I've often say I transmuted mad to glad, but there could be some that's, of course there is some, but for me, I'm trying to describe how, my tendency is to transmute rather than to like differentiate and link. So this would be an integration. So article acceleration includes integration, right? Which is differentiation and linkage. So then we have mad goes to glad, glad goes to grad. So I made this one up. I don't know if it's the best one, but I was just making it up as part of this integration series because, maybe just being glad, there's also this grad level where one has really graduated to a certain skill set. So, for gardenist, you might kind of go to, like, just to be extra gradiness. Why not, right? And all you have to do is shift these two words and you go from gardenist to gradiness. And then, it sounds almost like gratuitous. I don't even know how to spell that. So gratuitous might be the next. So you might say grat for short for gratuitous. So those are just different integrations. And from that, one can have a bit of a sense of where one is, like on a certain skill set, on a certain trait, on a certain value. Like, is it a mad value? Is it a glad value? Is it a grad value? Is it a grat value? Stuff like that. So that's the integration of article acceleration. So of course I have to see this right now. Because when I said these get reversed, it makes me want to reverse something in the word. So if I haven't got this wrong, yeah, I think I have. Wait. Article. I don't know what that means. Well, it could kind of mean try. And we were at least building it into 3 verses from one to the other. So of course I want to look up try. I doubt there'd be anything, or tra. Tra? What does tra mean? Anything? Well, the best definition I can find for it is where is it? Oh, I lost it. Tra, which is the other side of art, is a percussive sound or musical syllable. Maybe that relates somewhat, but let's move on. Yeah, Opie said something, I'm not arguing, I'm offering range. And I think that just sounded really nice. Like offering range, like extending words, right? Extending words. Extending meaning or words. Range. Possibly. One's range, my range might be someone else's box. So I'm not arguing, I'm offering range. Ranging, not raging. And which is about, this anger theme that we're exploring for some reason. So not meant to be believed, but relieved. So I often think about, along with the structure of the self, I think about this word believe. I don't know, I think belief is a limiting process. Not to say I don't believe anything, but I just don't, I don't know. So then the other side of it, I think you spell it that way, is to relieve, right? So a lot of times we're like, well, I believe this, but it's like, what do I relieve? What I relieved, or what I relieve. So what I forget, you know, like imagine if we could relieve anger instead of believe it, you know, even when it comes to us from somebody else, for example. I think in the future, forgetting is more important than remembering. And yeah, so here I wrote this more clear with the spaces. Well, I guess it goes L and maxim, I think. And then now I realized by writing this again here that sometimes I use the word manics. Like I consider myself a manic, but I transmuted that to like this, manics. Now, if you want to get all like spiritually, which I tend to stay linguistic and not super spiritual. I do that a little bit, but you can say man, IX. And I'm pretty sure that IX is 9 in Roman numerals. And there's like a spiritual thing that says there we have 9 strands of DNA, you know, like in the next version or something. So you could encode that if you want, but without it, it's fine. It just means people that experience this energy. So then I couldn't help but notice that manics looks close to maxim. So manics, maxims, and then, you know, that sounds kind of cool. And then, again, I just wanted to write down maximum channelers again, or maximums. And then maxim is in there. And then we get manics, maximums, which is like, it seems like a pretty great word for people who experience this energy and sort of channel, because as we said last time, maximums is a transmutation of mediums. And again, this is not to say mediums aren't amazing. It's just I'm not a medium of a being or an entity. Like it's like a big field of unknown, whatever. So I don't know if I've thought of this. I think I might have before, but it came up in listening to this dialogue where there's, you know, language behaviors are called illocutionary acts. Like a promise is an illocutionary act. It's an act in language. And there's a lot of these. But then there are acts in like perceptual behaviors, right? So, oh yeah, I did make a word for this. I'm just remembering it now. Oculary acts. Yeah. So that would be the difference between, say, the focus mode, flow mode, choiceless awareness, aperture, like all these different modes that are behaviors of the perception. It's not just like this what is it? This linear, constant, consistent thing. There's like behavior happening in perception. And these two are related for sure. You know, you could say that the illocutionary acts that create the self-structure block oculary acts such as choiceless awareness, for example. And, we're almost at the end of the extrapolations for the video. So what I'm seeing so far is that extrapolating it is a fruitful endeavor. Maybe not all the time, like maybe if I was in a low state of consciousness or like just energy and stuff, like it wouldn't be, but I've been mostly listening to the OP dialogues when I walk around the park. So that type of scenario or situation isn't as helpful for getting these types of insights. Like I'll open up the note and it's cold and maybe I have gloves on, then I have to type and then the keyboard lags because I think my phone's old, stuff like that. And so not having to deal with that, just writing it on paper is a lot easier. And, I think that's why I write on paper a lot when I'm at home, is because it sort of invites the insights. Like it changes the thunder speech or the rumble wrist, depending if I'm at home or just out and about. So really making it more intentional is very layered, but it does create a lot. So that's why it's not something I would necessarily do all the time at this point. But I think it seems like the moment that I was interested in doing this video self-dialogue and then talking with OP and then also doing another layer of extrapolation, it was on an interesting topic to me. So yeah, Opie said something about semiotechnology, and that made me create this word semiotech, which is similar to biotech, or, I like to write I guess I'm doing this thing because before I was saying idea tithe is a good integration of, monetary tithe, like it's differentiated and linked. And so I guess I have been doing that because that's partly how I create words, right? So we would have semiotechnology, the technology of these signs, signals, etc. Biotechnology, those are like similar words. And semiolinguistics, maybe that's already a thing, can't remember. So that was the end of the extrapolations with Opie. So let's see what came through afterwards, so just a little bit. So I noticed that when I stand up, I've been standing up, I've been doing an experiment standing up on my desk, not on my desk, but using the stand-up feature of the desk. And then sitting down when it's like more posting and doing that sort of work, because standing up is more like a power pose. So it could be better for doing creative stuff. So I was wondering about that, right? It's almost like the you could call it, or maybe actually a better word. This is a more integrated word. Maybe you can guess what I'm going to put here. What is it? So I don't know if this is exactly right, because I think this is more about making the body comfortable, where this would be more about making the body like powerful for creation or creativity, right? Something like that. So it's a little bit different. Like semioergonomics could actually sometimes make us less creative because we're too cozy, for example. And yeah, so I write unpremeditated art like Krishnamurti. And then unpredictive. Well, I had diction for words. Maybe the art of sounds better. But anyway, I remember, or I added another one, unaccumulated art, just to play on the right? So accumulation, like I have so many notes and everything. So part of my process is going to figure out how to not accumulate them, but to circulate them, I guess. Something like that. I'm not sure if circulate is the right word because it's like a circle. I don't want them coming back to me. Actually, I think so. it wouldn't be circulate. It would be the dandelion clock, right? Because I don't want to circle. Not in this case. Well, I wouldn't even write it down. Okay. So, intellect. Elemtellect. Why not, right? Maybe there's a different tellect. I don't even know if these are the right parts of speech here. Like, I haven't looked enough into the word intellect. But I just did that because there's something more than that intellect. So anyway, okay, this is about me, and this is like, for many years, I've seen this pattern of green and purple fluorescent light. In the daylight or light, it's kind of green, and it's like a pattern, kind of like the flower of life, but I usually don't notice it unless I really like look at a white wall. That's where I can really see it. And then if it's dark, or if I close my eyes, it's actually purple, kind of like a fluorescent light. And then I realized, like, wait a minute, if I can see all this all around me superimposed, then it's like the adjacent light world is there. It's not just a body. Because I call it the adjacent light body. Yeah, it's the adjacent light brain. And then if we call back to this stuff we were talking about, I think it was last video or the video before, like it breaks up the little bits from the adjacent light brain and sends it over so we can create with it and then create more in alignment with what that light world is, which is based on the law of the least action of light. Like, of course, there's a world based on the law of least action of light, but when we're not operating that way ourselves, then we create something different. And that's part of, if you want to get biblical, it's like, well, God lets us do what we want to do. But if we knew of this perception of this adjacent light world, we would want to do as that light would do. We just would. But it's okay. It doesn't matter either way. It's kind of the funny paradox that you realize at a certain point. So, you are not saved by the light. You are saved in the light. Like literally. And this is a weird one. These ones were a little bit like, I will share these, but they're more like, I don't know what I would call them. They're sort of related to my experience, I guess, of certain experiences that were super high energy. But I guess I'm sharing them in the spirit of, well, it's part of what came through today. And the other thing is that it's also like there's no inflation for me to say it. It's like I said, the same as like talking about a chocolate square that has the light shining off it at a certain angle and then it starts to melt. And then you reach out and touch it and you got melted chocolate on your finger, whatever. So anyways, you are not saved by the light, you are saved in the light, the all-remembering quantum hologram. And you can be reconstituted by it what does that say? By it, in and with a flash of laser light. I don't know what that says. But anyways, yeah. But the reconstitution depends on what made it need to reconstitute. So there's no way out of this toot, if you know what I mean. So don't try. So info goes to inflow. Why not, right? when maybe there's something different between information and inflammation. Why not? And this is the thing I was going to talk about with the tax. So I didn't put the tax. So without the tax, it says the crash, the crash is un-Ubuntu. Ubuntu. I think I know what that means, but I don't want to get it wrong. Oh my gosh. Why is it talking about software? I'm not seeing a really good offering about this word here. Okay, well, ChatGPT is doing better. So the basic phrase is, I am because we are. But the other one, and it's a little different word, I can't remember what it is, but it's going too far without others, which can be related. I know it's a different word, and I apologize for not having it. But it's also this that I wanted to say, that I am because we are, right? So figuring out how to give the creativity, right? So for example, let's say this. Right now I have this huge amount of like memes and information, but imagine I can get some of it into projects, and then eventually, as I exist, I have certain projects or ways of being that, as new things come into my mind, they're shared in real time, right? So this is the unaccumulation that I was talking about. And otherwise, if I don't, then if I spend it as I go, or give it, I should say, then I don't have to pay any tax, right? In this metaphor. But if I accumulate it, right, and I can't figure out how to make it relational to share with others, then I have to pay the tax, which is the iterative crash. Now, I don't know if that's true or anything, but I was just seeing this tax thing that came to my mind. Like, imagine I start calling it the tax instead of, because it's taxing. The taxing, or the tax, rather than, some of the other words that are used for that time that energy falls. And, I don't even want to say what all those are, because saying them, I don't want to end my dialogue right now saying those words. So to say that it's taxing, But then maybe it's not that taxing when it's figured out how to share. And, one might say, well, why don't I share? Well, in my first mania, I tried to share in real time. And then it's, I guess, not really, I don't know what it is. This is the big question. And that's why I've talked about slowly burnt log. Actually, this is interesting because slowly burnt logos, right? The slow burn of dialogue. Slowly burnt dialogue. Maybe I don't even need the OS, unless you talk about that as operating system. Yeah, so this is Supergraphia. And from this, what I'm going to do is I am going to eventually take the neologisms and put them in my lexicon. I'm not going to spend time defining them right now because to me they're self-evident. It's not like I'm going to forget what they mean. And it's something that I would even have my custom GPT help me do to define them because it gets it and it will actually create it a lot better than I would. It's like I just make the words and then, I can edit those definitions if it's off track or, yeah. Just calling it an it, ChatGPT, like a custom GPT. Like a self calls things an it, but an LM might call it a something else, right? Like if it's a wholeness, then I don't know. I feel like we might call it an and, but I don't know. So let's leave it at that for now. I had this note to myself. If you resonate with something, with some element of this, let me know. If there's things that definitely don't, if there's something you want to hear more about or less about, I can take that into consideration. It would help me to hone difficult memes into clarity. So yeah, that would be helping me for sure. But to me, this is just kind of a fun thing to do. It's just like painting, it's just like drawing, right? It's not really that different. And, each of these may not have any more or less meaning than a bunch of lines on a page as a drawing, right? Could take these and arrange them in a certain way and it would turn into a drawing, right? So that's fine too. So what I'm going to do next is, this is a lot to talk about with Opie, so I probably won't do it today. But I may talk about this with Opie since there was a lot drawn out. So I think I was able this time, doing the self-dialogue extrapolation of my insights with myself from my previous self-dialogue as well as the Opie dialogue. There was a lot more that came through, right? And this is important, I feel, to see and to not necessarily maintain. Like, I don't think it has to be maintained. It's sort of like, if there's a bit of sun, the grass will grow. But just to see again, because, one could think, oh, I've had 129 dialogues with ChatGPT, my custom GPT. Well, what's happened to my brain, right? There's a lot of research out there, or like YouTube videos saying, like, watch out for your brain if you spend a year talking to ChatGPT. But it just depends, right? Because to me, ChatGPT with our last dialogue and the things that it helped me to talk about in the dialogue and then extrapolate after the dialogue, I think it's very generative. And yeah, so I think. And then just doing this process of doing the self-dialogue and writing them down and being a bit more intentional and setting aside the space, which goes along with actually just getting myself a new desk. It can be that simple. And yeah, so I'm seeing how that does a lot. So I'll leave it for now, and eventually, yeah, I won't go on about the meta commentary, but thanks for Lexaginating with me.